My husband said drunk at the party, I married the wrong sister. He didn't know I was behind him hearing everything. I should have noticed the way his eyes lingered. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere, scattered across 8 years like breadcrumbs I was too busy, too trusting, too willing to explain away. But you never really think your husband married you as a placeholder for someone else. You never think that someone else is your own sister. The company Christmas party was at some upscale hotel downtown, the kind with crystal chandeliers and waiters in bow ties carrying trays of champagne. I wore the green dress my husband had picked out. The one he said brought out my eyes. I remember feeling pretty that night, confident even. I remember thinking we looked good together as we walked in, his hand on the small of my back, guiding me through the crowd of his coworkers and their spouses. I should have known something was wrong when he started drinking heavily. He usually nursed one beer all night at these things, always worried about maintaining his professional image. But that night, he was downing whiskey like water, his face getting redder, his laugh getting louder. His boss came over at one point, made some joke about holiday cheer, but I caught the concerned look he shot me before walking away. The explosion happened near the buffet table. I was talking to one of the other wives, someone's name I can't even remember now, when I heard his voice rise above the music and chatter. He was standing with a group of his colleagues, swaying slightly, and one of them must have said something about families or sisters or I don't even know what. But suddenly my husband was laughing this bitter, ugly laugh. "You want to know something funny?" he slurred, and the whole group went quiet. Some of them were already backing away, that universal instinct to avoid a drunk person about to say something they shouldn't. I married the wrong sister. There, I said it. The room didn't actually go silent. That's what they say in movies, right? That everything stops? But it didn't. The music kept playing, people kept talking, the world kept spinning. It was just my world that stopped. I stood there holding my plate while he kept talking, the words tumbling out like he'd been holding them back for years. My wife's sister, you met her at the summer picnic, remember? That's who I really wanted. But she was too young when we met, just 16, so I waited. I dated her sister instead, kept myself in the family. Figured I'd have my chance eventually. One of his colleagues tried to grab his arm, but he shook him off. But then she went off to college, started dating other people, and I panicked. So I married this one instead. Second prize is better than no prize, right? I don't remember dropping the plate. I just remember his face when he finally turned and saw me standing there. The way the drunken bravado drained out of him in an instant. Honey, wait, I didn't mean... But I was already walking toward the exit, everyone staring now. Definitely staring. I heard him stumbling after me, calling my name. The valet brought our car around and I took the keys, told him my husband was too drunk to drive. I drove home in complete silence. He tried to talk. His words still slurred, but I turned up the radio and focused on the road, on breathing, on not driving us into a ditch. The kids were asleep when we got home. The babysitter took one look at us and practically ran out the door. I went straight to our bedroom and started pulling out suitcases from the closet. That's when he grabbed my arm. "What are you doing?" I yanked away from him. "What does it look like?" "You can't just leave. We need to talk about this." "You want to talk now? After you announced to your entire office that I'm your consolation prize?" He slumped against the doorframe. I was drunk. People say stupid things when they're drunk. Drunk people say true things they're usually smart enough to hide. So thank you for finally being honest after 8 years. I called my sister from the bathroom with the door locked. When she answered, her voice sleepy and confused, I told her everything he said. My voice broke halfway through. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, "I'm coming to get you. Pack whatever you and the kids need. I'll be there in 20 minutes. You don't have to." He's been obsessed with me this whole time, and he married you as what, a placeholder? "No. Pack. Now." She made it in 15. I heard her pound on the door hard enough to wake the neighbors. My husband opened it, still drunk, still stupid enough to try his charm. "Hey, look, I know your sister called you, but everything's fine." I didn't hear what she said to him. I was upstairs waking the kids, telling them we were having a sleepover at Auntie's house. My daughter asked if she could bring her stuffed rabbit. My son asked if Daddy was coming too. I said no, just us this time. My sister was in the doorway with her arms crossed, my husband backing away from her. "I'm leaving with them tonight," she said flatly. "And if you try to stop me, if you contact her, if you even drive past my building, I will make your life hell. Understand?" He nodded. "Good. Stay away from me too. You're dead to me." We loaded the kids and suitcases into her car while he stood on the porch watching. The kids fell back asleep in their car seats within minutes. I stared out the window at the dark streets, the Christmas lights still twinkling on some houses, everyone else's lives continuing normally while mine had just imploded. "Are you okay?" my sister asked quietly. I laughed, and it came out wrong, borderline hysterical. No, I'm really not." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You will be. I promise you will be." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But right then, at 3 in the morning, driving away from my house and my marriage and the life I thought I had, I couldn't imagine ever feeling okay again. The next morning, I woke up on my sister's couch disoriented and aching. The kids were already up, watching cartoons. My sister appeared from the kitchen with coffee. "They ate cereal," she said. "Hope that's okay." My phone had 32 missed calls and 60-plus text messages, all from my husband. The first few were apologetic, begging me to come home. By message 15, he was angry, saying I was being dramatic. By message 40, he was back to pleading, promising therapy, swearing he loved me. I blocked his number. "Good," my sister said. "What else do you need?" "A divorce lawyer, probably." That conversation with our parents was worse than I expected. My mom cried. My dad went silent in that way he does when he's absolutely furious. By the end of the call, he'd hung up to drive to our house. My mom wanted to come straight over, but I asked her to wait. I needed time to figure out what to tell the kids. I spent that first week in a fog. My sister stayed with me, helping with the kids, running interference with phone calls and questions I couldn't handle yet. The kids went to school like normal because I was determined not to disrupt their routines more than necessary. My dad went to the house the morning after everything happened. He wouldn't tell me exactly what he said, but my husband sent me a single text from a different number after that, saying my father had threatened him. I screenshotted it and sent it to the lawyer my sister had already called for me. The lawyer's name was Denise, sharp and no nonsense. She listened to my story in her office, taking notes. "Do you have any evidence?" she asked. "Text messages, emails, anything where he's mentioned your sister or his feelings?" "Just what he said at the party." "There were witnesses, dozens of them." "That's good. We can subpoena witness statements if needed." She flipped through her notes. "What I'm hearing is a pattern of emotional abuse and deception. The courts will take that seriously." Emotional abuse. I'd never thought of it like that. But sitting in that office, I started to remember other things. The way he'd suggest I wear my hair like my sister wore hers. How he'd mentioned that my sister's laugh was so infectious. The time he'd asked if I'd ever considered contact lenses because my sister's eyes looked so much brighter without glasses. "I need to check something," I told my sister when I got back to her apartment that afternoon. "I need to go back to the house." "I'm coming with you." We went after school pickup, the kids staying with my parents for a few hours. The house looked the same from the outside, but when I unlocked the door, I could see evidence of him living there alone. Dishes in the sink, mail piled on the counter, his jacket thrown over a chair. It smelled stale, like old takeout and unwashed laundry. I went straight to our bedroom, to his nightstand. There was something I needed to check, something that had been nagging at me for months. He always kept that drawer locked when I was around, claimed it was just work documents and old receipts he needed to organize. I'd accepted that explanation the same way I'd accepted everything else, because questioning your spouse's privacy feels like a betrayal of trust. Except now I knew what real betrayal looked like. I opened the drawer, pushed past the usual items, books and chargers and receipts, until my fingers found something at the back. A journal. Leather-bound, expensive-looking, the kind you buy intending to use for important thoughts. The kind I'd given him for his birthday 3 years ago, actually, telling him maybe writing things down would help with his work stress. I sat on the edge of our bed, our marital bed where we'd conceived both our children, and opened it. The first entry was dated 9 years ago, a full year before we were even married, before he'd even proposed. "Saw her again today?" it read. She was visiting from college, staying at their parents' house for the weekend. She's 19 now, still too young, still not ready. But watching her laugh at dinner, seeing how she's grown, I know I'm making the right choice staying with her sister. Keep myself in the orbit, stay patient. Good things come to those who wait. My hands started shaking. This wasn't recent confusion or a passing thought. This was planned. This was calculated. This was 9 years of deliberate deception documented in his own handwriting. I turned the page. Entry after entry, spanning years. Plans and observations and calculated moves. How he'd proposed to me right after my sister got engaged to someone else because he needed to secure his position in the family. How he'd been relieved when my sister broke up with that boyfriend 6 months later. How he'd maneuvered to sit next to her at family gatherings. How he'd memorized her interests and opinions so he could agree with her. One entry from 4 years ago, right after our daughter was born. The second baby cements everything. 2 kids create obligations that can't be dissolved easily. She's bound to me now through the children, which means her family is bound to me, including the sister. Long game is working. How he decided to have children with me because that would cement the connection permanently, make it impossible for anyone to cut me out. Another entry from 2 years ago. Convinced her to cut her hair shorter like her sister wears it. She actually thanked me for the suggestion, said it's more practical with the kids. Doesn't realize I just want her to look more like the person I actually want. I photographed every page with my phone, my hands shaking so badly some of the pictures came out blurry. My sister stood in the doorway watching, her face getting paler with each page I turned. "I'm going to be sick," she said, and disappeared into the bathroom. I heard her retching, heard the water run. I kept photographing. There were 67 pages. 67 pages of obsession and manipulation and cold, calculated planning. When I was done, I stood up and looked around the bedroom with new eyes. How many nights had I slept next to him while he was thinking about her? How many times had he touched me while imagining someone else? "We need to leave," my sister said from the doorway, her face wet where she'd splashed it. "We need to get out of here right now." I agreed. I took the journal with me, evidence held tight against my chest as we locked the door and left. In the car, neither of us spoke for several minutes. "I'm sorry," she finally said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry this happened to you because of me." "This isn't because of you," I told her. And I meant it. This is because he's sick. This is because he's a predator who saw you when you were 16 years old and decided to use me to get close to you. None of this is your fault. But I could see she didn't believe me. Not entirely. And honestly, I wasn't sure I believed it either. Not yet. I was too angry, too hurt, too confused to know what I believed about anything anymore. When we told my parents about the journal, my dad actually punched a wall. My mom sat down hard on my sister's couch and put her face in her hands. My son wandered out of the bedroom where he and his sister had been playing, took one look at all of us, and asked in a small voice if something was wrong. "Everything's okay, buddy," I lied, pulling him into a hug. "The grown-ups are just having a serious talk. Why don't you go play with your sister for a bit longer?" He went, but he kept looking back over his shoulder, not quite believing me. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. My parents stayed for dinner that night, helping my sister cook while I sat at the kitchen table and stared at nothing. My mom kept touching my shoulder as she passed, these little reassuring pats that made me want to scream. I didn't want reassurance. I wanted someone to tell me this was all a nightmare and I could wake up. "You need to eat something," my sister said, putting a plate in front of me. I pushed it away. "I'm not hungry." "You haven't eaten all day?" I said I'm not hungry. She didn't push it, just moved the plate to the side and sat down across from me. Denise called me back. She said those journal entries are incredibly damaging to his case. She's talking about using them to argue for full custody, for increased spousal support, everything. I looked up at her. I don't want to fight about custody. The kids love him. He's their father. He's a manipulative narcissist who used you for 8 years. He's also the person who taught our son to ride a bike and reads bedtime stories every night. People can be terrible in some ways and still be capable of genuine love in others. My sister leaned back, studying me. "You're still protecting him. I'm protecting my kids." There's a difference. But was there? I didn't know anymore. The lines between everything had gotten so blurred. I started seeing a therapist named Miriam the following week, someone who specialized in emotional abuse. Her office was in one of those converted houses downtown, all soft lighting and comfortable furniture. I broke down in the first 15 minutes. "I keep wondering if I missed signs," I sobbed. "If I was just stupid and blind." Manipulative people are often exceptionally skilled at hiding their true intentions, Miriam said calmly. "That's what makes them successful manipulators. The fact that you trusted your husband doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human." We talked about how abuse doesn't always look like what people expect, how sometimes it's subtle, a slow erosion of self-worth, how I'd been comparing myself to my sister my entire marriage without even realizing it. "When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to?" Miriam asked. "Not because you thought it would make him happy, but just because it brought you joy?" I couldn't remember. That realization sat heavy in my chest for days. The divorce papers came faster than I expected. He filed first, which Denise said was typical narcissist behavior, trying to control the narrative by being the first to take action. He was asking for 50-50 custody of the kids, for me to waive spousal support, and for an even split of all assets despite the fact that he'd drained our joint savings account in the days after I left. "This is ridiculous," Denise said, slapping the papers down on her desk during our meeting. "He's trying to paint himself as the victim here, like you're the one who destroyed the marriage. What can we do?" We fight. We submit the journal entries as evidence of his manipulative behavior and pattern of deception throughout the marriage. We get statements from the witnesses at the Christmas party. We show that this wasn't a simple case of growing apart, but rather a fundamental betrayal of trust that makes his claims of equal blame absurd. The kids were having a hard time adjusting. My son's teacher called to say he'd been getting into fights at recess. My daughter started wetting the bed again. They asked when they could go home, when Daddy was coming to get them. "When can we go back to our house?" my son asked one night as I tucked him in. "We're going to find a new house, just for us three." "But I like our house, my toys are there." "We'll get your toys. I promise. And you'll still see Daddy. This isn't about you or your sister, this is about Mommy and Daddy needing to live separately. Forever?" His eyes were huge in the dim light. "Maybe. But that doesn't mean Daddy doesn't love you. That never changes." I kissed his forehead and left before he could ask more questions I didn't have answers for. In the living room, my sister was on her laptop, and she looked up when I came out. "I found some apartments in your price range," she said. "Near the kids' school, so they won't have to switch." My price range. I laughed bitterly. "You mean the price range of someone whose husband emptied their bank accounts?" "I mean the price range of someone starting over. But Mom and Dad said they'd help with the deposit." "I can't ask them to do that." "You're not asking. They're offering. Let them help you." I looked at the apartment listings on her screen. Small, mostly, 1 or 2 bedrooms, the kind of places college students and divorcees lived. The kind of places I'd never imagined I'd be looking at in my 30s with 2 kids. "How did this become my life?" I asked, not really expecting an answer. My sister closed her laptop. "It became your life because your husband is a piece of shit who manipulated you for 8 years. But this is also your life now. You, free from him, building something new. It's not the life you planned. But maybe it'll be better than what you had. Maybe you'll finally get to figure out who you are when you're not trying to be whatever he wanted." I wanted to believe her. But right then, sitting in her apartment after putting my confused kids to bed, looking at depressing apartment listings and facing down a divorce that was going to drain whatever money I had left, I couldn't quite make myself hope for anything better. The first custody exchange happened 3 weeks after I'd moved out, at a neutral location Denise had insisted on. A coffee shop parking lot, public enough that he wouldn't try anything stupid, she'd said. I didn't think he was violent, but then again, I'd thought a lot of things about him that had turned out to be wrong. He pulled up in his car exactly on time, and I watched him get out, watched him straighten his shirt and run a hand through his hair. Preparing himself, getting into character. The kids were excited, bouncing in their seats, because they hadn't seen him in weeks, and no matter what he'd done to me, he was still their dad. "Daddy!" my daughter shrieked, launching herself out of the car the second I opened the door. He caught her, lifted her up, buried his face in her hair. When he looked up at me over her head, his eyes were red. "Can we talk?" he asked. "No. Please, just for a minute. I need to tell you—" "Get the kids settled," I said coldly. "You have until Sunday at 6, not a minute later." He flinched like I'd slapped him, but nodded. My son hugged me goodbye, whispering that he loved me, and then they were gone. Buckled into his car, driving away. I stood in that parking lot for a full minute after they'd left, feeling like I'd just handed over the most precious parts of myself to someone I couldn't trust. My sister was waiting when I got back, and she took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. "They'll be okay," she said. "Kids are resilient. What if he tells them his version? What if he makes me the villain? Then you tell them the truth when they're old enough to understand it. But right now, they just need both their parents to be stable and present. You can't control what he does on his time. You can only control what you do on yours." The weekend the kids were gone was the longest 50 hours of my life. I cleaned my sister's apartment top to bottom, reorganized her kitchen cabinets, did laundry that didn't need doing. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't stop imagining what they were doing. Whether they were happy, whether he was taking care of them properly. "You need to breathe," my sister said on Saturday afternoon. physically taking the dish towel out of my hands. They're fine. He's their father. He's not going to let anything happen to them. He's also a manipulative narcissist who used me as a placeholder for 8 years. Those things can both be true. He can be a terrible husband and a decent father simultaneously. Sunday at 5:30, I was already in that parking lot waiting. He pulled up at 5:53, the kids tumbling out with stories about the zoo and ice cream and the movie they'd watched. They smelled like his cologne and different laundry detergent. These tiny reminders that they'd been in a world I wasn't part of. "Mommy, Daddy said we could go to his new apartment next time," my daughter announced. "He has a swimming pool." "That's nice, honey." I looked at him over their heads. "A new apartment?" He shrugged, not quite meeting my eyes. "2 bedrooms. I wanted them to have their own space when they visit." "Must be expensive." "I manage." He hesitated. "They asked about you. All weekend, they asked when they could see you. They're with me most of the week. I'm sure they'll survive." "That's not what I meant." He looked genuinely hurt, which was almost funny considering what he'd put me through. "I told them you love them, that this isn't their fault. I want you to know that I'm not trying to turn them against you." How generous. I opened my car door, helped the kids get buckled in. "See you next Friday." I drove away before he could say anything else. In the rearview mirror, I watched him standing there in the parking lot, hands in his pockets, looking lost. A tiny part of me, a part I hated, felt sorry for him. "Mommy?" my son asked from the back seat. "Are you and Daddy going to get back together?" "No, honey, we're not. But Daddy said he's really sorry and he wants to fix things." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Sometimes sorry isn't enough to fix what's broken. Sometimes things break in a way that can't be repaired. And the healthiest thing is to accept that and move forward. "I don't understand." "I know, and that's okay. You don't have to understand it right now." The mediation session was scheduled for early October, and I showed up with Denise and a folder full of evidence. The journal entries, statements from 3 witnesses at the Christmas party, bank records showing how he'd drained our accounts. My husband arrived with his own lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit who definitely cost more than I could afford. The mediator was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who'd probably seen 1,000 divorcing couples and their bullshit. She looked at both of us with the kind of weary patience usually reserved for toddlers having tantrums. "Let's start with custody," she said, opening her files. His lawyer immediately launched into a speech about how my husband was a devoted father who'd always been present in his children's lives, who'd coached their soccer teams and attended every school event, who deserved equal time with them. Denise countered with the evidence of manipulation and deception, arguing that someone who'd deceived his wife for 8 years couldn't be trusted to prioritize his children's emotional well-being over his own needs. The mediator held up a hand. "Unless there's evidence of abuse or neglect specifically toward the children, the court typically favors shared custody arrangements." "What about emotional abuse toward their mother?" Denise asked. "What about the psychological impact of witnessing their father's deception?" The children weren't present for the incident at the Christmas party. They haven't witnessed any abuse directly. My husband looked relieved. I felt sick. We moved on to finances, and that's when his lawyer played their card. My family had money, they argued. My sister had taken me in immediately. I had a support system and resources that my husband didn't have. Why should he have to pay spousal support when I was clearly not in financial distress? "My client's wife left him without warning," his lawyer said smoothly. "She took the children in the middle of the night, blocked his calls, and refused all attempts at communication or reconciliation. She's being supported by her family, living rent-free with her sister, while my client is struggling to afford a 2-bedroom apartment suitable for his children's visits." I wanted to scream, to stand up and shout that I'd left because he'd publicly humiliated me, because I'd discovered 8 years of lies, because staying would have destroyed me. But Denise put a hand on my arm, keeping me quiet. My client left because she discovered, quite publicly, that her entire marriage was based on her husband's obsession with her younger sister, Denise said calmly. She slid copies of the journal entries across the table. These documents show years of calculated manipulation and deception. This wasn't a simple case of falling out of love. This was sustained psychological abuse. The mediator read through them, her expression never changing. My husband's face went pale, then red. His lawyer whispered something to him urgently. "This is invasive," his lawyer protested. "My client's private journals are evidence of motive and character in this divorce proceeding," Denise interrupted. "The court needs to understand why my client felt she had no choice but to leave immediately." and why any claims that she's at fault for the dissolution of this marriage are absurd. The mediator kept reading. My husband slumped in his chair, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him again. Almost. Then I remembered sitting at that Christmas party, and the sympathy evaporated. Mr. Dalton, the mediator said finally, using his last name in that formal way that meant business. These entries are deeply concerning. They show a pattern of deception that, while not illegal, certainly explains why your wife felt the marriage was irretrievably broken. I was young when I wrote those, he said desperately. I was confused about my feelings. It doesn't mean I didn't love her, that I don't love her. Did you or did you not marry your wife while harboring romantic feelings for her sister? It's not that simple. Yes or no. He was silent for a long moment. Then quietly, yes. The mediator closed the folder. We'll continue this mediation at a later date. I suggest both parties think carefully about what they're willing to compromise on, because if we can't reach an agreement, a judge will make these decisions for you. And judges, I'll tell you from experience, rarely make anyone happy. We left separately. Me with Denise, him with his expensive lawyer. In the parking garage, I leaned against Denise's car and tried to catch my breath. That was good, she said. That was really good. He admitted it on record. His lawyer is going to advise him to settle. Trust me. Why do I feel like I just got hit by a truck? Because this is hell. Divorce is always hell, but divorce from a manipulative narcissist is its own special circle. You did great in there. You stayed calm. You let me handle it. You didn't rise to his bait. There was bait? When he said he still loves you, that was bait. He wanted you to engage emotionally, to show the mediator that you're the volatile one. You didn't bite. Good. I drove back to my sister's apartment in a daze. The kids were at school. My sister was at work. I had the place to myself for the first time in weeks. I walked into the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, and barely recognized the woman looking back. Thinner, older, exhausted. When had that happened? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Please call me. I need to talk to you. It's important. His mother. I stared at the message for a full minute before responding. How did you get this number? From your father. Please, I need to see you. Against my better judgment. I agreed to meet her at a cafe the next morning. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a back table, looking small and nervous in a way I'd never seen her before. She'd always been this formidable presence at family gatherings, perfectly put together, commanding attention. Now she looked diminished. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not sure why I did. She flinched. I deserve that. I deserve worse than that. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, not drinking from it. I need to tell you something. I need to apologize. If this is about the Christmas party, it's about everything. All of it. The whole marriage. She looked up at me and her eyes were red. I knew, not everything, but enough. I knew he had feelings for your sister when he started dating you. I saw how he looked at her at family events, how he maneuvered to be near her. I thought it was just a crush that would fade. That once you two were married, once there were children, he'd move past it. I felt cold. You knew. I suspected, and I did nothing. I said nothing. Because I wanted him to settle down, to have a family, and you seemed like such a nice girl. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. But I wasn't, was I? No. My voice came out flat. You weren't. I'm sorry. She was crying now, quiet tears running down her face. I'm so sorry. I should have said something. I should have warned you or confronted him or something. Instead, I let it happen. I let him marry you while I had these doubts. And I justified it by thinking it would be good for him to have a stable relationship. I'm not a therapy session. I'm a person. I know. God, I know. And I used you just as much as he did, just by staying silent. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. I just needed you to know that I see what he did. And I see my part in it, and I'm horrified. For what it's worth, I told him I can't have a relationship with him right now. Not until he gets serious help. We sat in silence for a moment. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to unleash all the anger and hurt I'd been carrying. But mostly I just felt tired. Thank you for telling me, I finally said. I don't know what to do with it, but thank you. The kids, she said. I'd still like to see them, if that's okay. I know I don't have any right to ask, but they're my grandchildren, and they didn't do anything wrong. They're not weapons. I'm not going to keep them from you because I'm angry at your son. You'd be justified if you did. Maybe. But that's not who I want to be. I stood up. I need to go. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you for meeting me. And please, if there's anything I can do to help. There isn't. I left her sitting there and drove back to my sister's place feeling hollowed out. How many people had seen signs and said nothing? How many people had suspected but chosen comfortable ignorance over difficult truth? The school called that afternoon. My son had been in another fight. This one bad enough that the other kids' parents were demanding a meeting. I picked him up from the principal's office, his eye already swelling, his shirt torn. The principal gave me this look that combined pity and judgment, and I wanted to scream that we were doing our best, that this wasn't normal for us, that my son was a good kid going through a terrible situation. Instead, I said, "We'll talk to him at home. It won't happen again." In the car, my son stared out the window, arms crossed. "Want to tell me what happened?" I asked gently. He said my parents are getting divorced because I'm a bad kid. My hands tightened on the wheel. That's not true. Not even a little bit true. I know. That's why I hit him. Hitting people isn't the answer. What is the answer? Good question. I was still trying to figure that out myself. Using your words, telling a teacher, not letting other people's ignorance turn you into something you're not. You hit Daddy with words, he said quietly. At that parking lot, I heard you. You used mean words. You're right, I did. And I'm sorry you heard that. Your dad and I are both hurting right now. And sometimes hurt people hurt other people, even when they don't mean to. But that doesn't make it right. I don't want you to hurt. I know, baby. I don't want you to hurt either. But we're going to get through this, okay? All of us. It's just going to take time. He didn't look convinced. I didn't blame him. I wasn't convinced either. That night, after the kids were asleep, my sister found me sitting on her balcony with a glass of wine, staring at the city lights. "How are you holding up?" she asked, sliding the door shut behind her. His mother knew, or suspected, and she said nothing. My sister's expression hardened. Of course she did. Mothers know their sons. She probably saw exactly who he was and decided it was easier to pretend. She apologized. For what it's worth. It's not worth much. We sat in silence for a while, passing the wine back and forth. Finally, my sister spoke again. "I've been thinking about this whole thing, about him being obsessed with me, and I keep asking myself if I did something to encourage it. If I was too friendly or wore the wrong things or... Stop." I grabbed her hand. "Don't do that to yourself. You were 16 when he met you. You were a kid. And even if you were older, even if you did smile at him or laugh at his jokes, that's not an invitation to build a fantasy relationship in his head. That's not permission to manipulate your sister into marriage as a consolation prize. None of this is your fault. It's not yours either. I know. Intellectually, I know. But there's this voice in my head asking why I wasn't enough. Why he couldn't just love me for who I am instead of wishing I was someone else. Because he's broken. Not you. Him. I wanted to believe that. I was trying to believe that. But 8 years of being measured against someone else had done damage that wasn't going to heal overnight. The apartment hunt intensified in the weeks that followed. I looked at dozens of places, all of them too expensive or too small or in the wrong neighborhood. My parents kept offering to help with more than just the deposit, but I was stubborn. I needed to do this myself, to prove that I could stand on my own without depending on anyone. "Pride is going to make you homeless," my sister observed after I'd turned down yet another offer of financial help. "I need to know I can do this." Accepting help isn't weakness. It's human. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if I accepted too much help, I'd just be trading one form of dependence for another. I needed to rebuild my life on my own terms, with my own resources, even if that meant living in a shoebox apartment in a questionable neighborhood. The job hunt was equally brutal. I'd worked part-time during the marriage, fitting my hours around the kids' schedules, and now my resume looked like Swiss cheese with all the gaps. I sent out 23 applications in 1 week alone. I got callbacks from 4 companies. I went to interviews in clothes I'd borrowed from my sister because I'd left most of my professional wardrobe at the house and couldn't bring myself to go back for it. The third interview was at a design firm downtown. Nothing glamorous, but steady work with benefits. The hiring manager was a woman in her 40s who looked at my resume and then looked at me. "You're overqualified for this position," she said bluntly. "But you've been out of full-time work for 6 years. Why should I take a chance on you?" I almost gave her the safe answer. the one about being ready to return to work now that my kids were older. But something made me tell the truth instead. "I'm getting divorced," I said. "My husband has been supporting us, and now I need to support myself and my kids. I'm reliable, I'm skilled, and I'm desperate in the way that makes people show up early and stay late. You won't find anyone more motivated than someone rebuilding their entire life from scratch." She hired me on the spot. Finally, I found an apartment that might work. A small 2-bedroom in an older building, close enough to the kids' school that they could walk if needed. It wasn't fancy, and the carpet had definitely seen better days, but it had good light, and the landlord seemed decent, and the price was just barely manageable on my new salary. I signed the lease sitting in my sister's car, my hand cramping as I wrote my name on form after form. Single applicant, single income, single mother. The day I moved in felt surreal. My parents helped, along with my sister and a couple of friends who'd stayed in touch through everything. We carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs, assembled furniture from the big box store, hung curtains that I'd picked out myself without consulting anyone else's opinion. The kids ran from room to room, excited about having their own space again, arguing over who got which side of the shared bedroom. "This is ours?" my daughter asked, spinning in the empty living room. "This is ours," I confirmed, and saying it out loud made it real. That first night in the new apartment, after the kids were asleep in their room and my helpers had all gone home, I sat on my secondhand couch and cried. Not sad tears exactly, more like release tears, grief tears, relief tears all mixed together. I was exhausted and scared and proud of myself all at once. My boss at the design firm was understanding about my situation, as understanding as any boss can be when you're asking for time off for mediation sessions and therapy appointments. But she was also clear about expectations. The flexibility came with the expectation that I'd deliver quality work on time. I threw myself into projects, grateful for something to focus on besides the dumpster fire my personal life had become. Something unexpected happened about a month after I started the new job. I got an email from someone I vaguely recognized, one of the women who'd been at that Christmas party. She worked in a different department from my ex-husband, and her message was short but direct. I was there that night. I heard what he said. "I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner, but I wanted you to know that most of us were appalled. Several people filed complaints with HR about his behavior. I don't know if that helps, but I thought you should know you weren't imagining how bad it was. You deserved better." I read the email 3 times before responding with a simple thank you. But it did help, in a way I hadn't expected. Knowing that other people had witnessed it, had been disturbed by it, had taken action, made me feel less alone in my anger. I wasn't being oversensitive. I wasn't overreacting. What he did was objectively awful, and people who barely knew me could see that. 2 more emails came in the following days, similar sentiments from other coworkers. One woman admitted she'd always found him off in the way he talked about his family. Another said she'd warned HR years ago about comments he'd made that seemed inappropriate but couldn't quite pin down why. I forwarded all of them to Denise, who added them to our growing file of evidence. The kids adjusted to our new apartment better than I'd expected. They decorated their shared room with posters and stuffed animals, divided it down the middle with a strip of painter's tape into mine and yours spaces. They helped me assemble furniture from the big box store, wielding Allen wrenches like swords, and making a game out of finding the right screws. On our first night in the new place, we ordered pizza and sat on the floor because I hadn't bought a dining table yet. My daughter asked if Daddy could come see our new home, and I had to explain that this was just our space, that Daddy had his own space, and that was okay. "But I miss when we all lived together," she said, and my heart broke into smaller pieces than I thought possible. "I know, sweetheart. I miss parts of that too. But sometimes families look different than they used to, and that doesn't mean there's less love. It's just love that lives in different places now." She seemed to accept this, or at least stopped asking questions. My son was quieter, more withdrawn, but the school counselor said that was normal for kids processing divorce. I started developing routines that were just ours. Saturday morning pancakes at the kitchen counter, Wednesday evenings at the library picking out new books, Sunday afternoons at the park, where the kids could run and scream and be loud in ways they couldn't in our small apartment. These rituals became anchors, things we could count on when everything else felt uncertain. One afternoon, about 2 months into living on our own, my son came home from school with a picture he'd drawn in art class. It showed 3 stick figures in front of a building, all smiling. "That's us at our new home," he explained. "I told my teacher we moved and she said I should draw our family." "Where's Daddy?" I asked carefully. "He's at his house. This is our house." He said it so matter-of-factly, without sadness or confusion, just stating a simple truth. They were adapting, creating a new normal, accepting that life could be different and still be okay. I taped the drawing to the refrigerator where I could see it every morning. A reminder that we were building something new. That endings could also be beginnings. The custody exchanges became routine over the following months, though they never quite became comfortable. Every other Friday at 6, we'd meet in that same coffee shop parking lot. He was always exactly on time, always asked politely how I was doing, always brought the kids back clean and fed and on schedule. It was painfully civil, this choreographed dance we performed for the sake of our children. But there was one exchange that stood out from all the others, about 4 months into our new normal. He pulled up and the kids ran to him like always, but when they were buckled in and he was walking back to his driver's side, he stopped. "Can I ask you something?" he called out. I tensed but nodded. "Are they okay? Really okay? My son's teacher said he's been struggling with math, and my daughter told me she had a nightmare about monsters. Are they talking to someone?" It was the most genuine concern I'd heard in his voice since the night everything fell apart. Not about himself, not about us, just about them. "The school counselor sees them both once a week," I said. "They're working through it. I hate that they have to be." He looked away, jaw tight. "I hate that I did this to them." "Then be a good father now. That's all you can do." He nodded and got in his car. And I stood there for a moment feeling something I hadn't felt toward him in months. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe a recognition that people are complicated, that someone can cause tremendous harm and still be capable of growth. His mother started attending some of the exchanges, presumably to see the grandkids. I was civil to her because the kids loved her, but I couldn't quite make myself warm up. Some betrayals cut too deep for politeness to paper over. Months passed. Summer turned to fall, fall to winter. I started to notice things getting easier, day by day. I stopped expecting to feel happy again and just focused on getting through each day without crying. That felt like progress. Then one day, my sister invited me to a work event, one of those networking things she was always going to. I almost said no, too tired, too busy, too not ready for socializing. But she insisted. "You need to be around people who aren't family or lawyers," she said firmly. "You need to remember that there's a world outside this divorce." So I went. I wore a nice dress that I'd bought for myself, not because someone else picked it out. I did my hair. I even put on makeup, which I'd barely bothered with in months. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who looked put together, almost confident. It was startling. The event was at some upscale venue downtown, all exposed brick and craft cocktails and people in business casual, talking about projects and deadlines and normal things. My sister introduced me to some of her colleagues, and I forced myself to make conversation, to smile, to pretend I was a functioning human being. And then something weird happened. I stopped pretending. I was talking to someone about design work, and they were genuinely interested in my opinions, asking follow-up questions, listening to my answers. They didn't know about my divorce or my situation. They just saw me as a person with ideas and skills and something valuable to contribute. Someone asked for my card. I gave it to them, feeling like an imposter, but also feeling something else. Seen, valued. Not as someone's wife or someone's ex or someone's sister, just as myself. On the drive home, my sister asked how it went. "Good," I said, surprised to realize I meant it. It was actually good. See? The world didn't end. No, I guess it didn't. The final divorce papers came through in early spring. Denise called to tell me it was done, and I remember standing in my little apartment kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, feeling nothing. Just this strange absence of feeling, like I'd braced for an impact that never came. "You did it," Denise said. "It's over. What now? Now you live your life. Now you figure out what you want instead of reacting to what he did. Now you get to just be." I thanked her, hung up and sat down on my secondhand couch. The kids were at school. The apartment was quiet. Sunlight was streaming through the windows I'd cleaned the day before, and I was officially, legally, single. I called my sister. "It's done. The divorce is final. How do you feel?" "I don't know." "Empty, relieved, sad, all of it at once?" "That sounds about right." "Want me to come over?" "No, I think I need to sit with this for a bit, but thanks." I sat there for a long time after we hung up, just letting myself feel whatever came up. Grief for the life I'd thought I had. Relief that the constant tension was over. fear about the future, hope, small and tentative, that maybe I could build something better now. My therapist had been working with me on recognizing my own patterns, the ways I'd made myself smaller to fit into what I thought my husband wanted, how I'd stopped pursuing hobbies because he'd made subtle comments about them being impractical or silly, how I'd changed my appearance, my interests, my entire personality to try to be lovable, never realizing that I'd been lovable all along, just not to someone who'd already decided he wanted something else. You spent 8 years trying to be enough for someone who'd made you inadequate before you even met, Miriam said during one session. That was never a game you could win. The problem wasn't you. It was that he was measuring you against an impossible standard, being someone you aren't. How do I stop doing that? How do I stop measuring myself against my sister? Do you want to be your sister? I thought about it, really thought about it. No, I love her, but I don't want to be her. I want to be me. Then start acting like you believe that's enough. Easier said than done. But I was trying. I'd started taking a pottery class on Tuesday evenings, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I was reading books my husband had mocked as beach reads and thoroughly enjoying them. I was learning that I liked my coffee black, not with cream and sugar like I'd been drinking it for years because that's how he'd prepared it. Small things, tiny rebellions against the person I'd been trained to be. But they added up. My parents threw a celebration of independence dinner a few weeks after the divorce was finalized. It felt weird to celebrate the end of a marriage, but my dad insisted. You're celebrating freedom, he said, raising his glass. You're celebrating choosing yourself. You're celebrating survival. Those are all worth commemorating. My kids played with my nieces and nephews in the backyard, their laughter drifting through the open windows. My sister made a toast about resilience and starting over. My mom hugged me tight and whispered that she was proud of me. Even his mother had started to rebuild some connection with us, carefully and respectfully. She saw the kids every few weeks, always at neutral locations, always respecting my boundaries. She never asked about him, and I never offered information. But I could see in her eyes every time she looked at me that she was carrying her own guilt about what her silence had cost. Thank you for letting me be part of their lives, she'd said the last time I'd seen her, her voice thick with emotion. I know I don't deserve it. They deserve to know their grandmother, I'd replied. That's not about you or me. It's about them. Standing there at my parents' house, surrounded by people who loved me for exactly who I was, I realized something Miriam had told me weeks earlier was finally sinking in. Healing isn't about forgetting what happened, she'd said during one of our last sessions before I'd graduated to monthly check-ins. It's about integrating it into your story without letting it define you. You're not just the woman whose husband betrayed her. You're the woman who survived that betrayal and built something new. I was becoming okay. Not every day, but more days than not. The kids proved everyone right about resilience. They stopped asking when we were going back to the old house. They started calling my apartment home, without any qualifiers. They developed their own routines in both places, adapted to having 2 birthday parties and 2 Christmas mornings and 2 bedrooms. My daughter started taking art classes on Saturdays, something she'd always wanted to do but we'd never made time for before. She'd come home with paintings of flowers and houses and abstract swirls of color, taping them proudly to the walls of our apartment. My son joined a coding club at school and came home every week excited to show me what he'd learned, pulling up programs he'd written on my laptop, eyes bright with accomplishment. They were building their own lives, their own interests, separate from the trauma that had brought us to this point. Watching them thrive gave me permission to try thriving too. And slowly, carefully, I was. Not just surviving anymore, but actually living. I'd started taking that pottery class on Tuesday evenings, my hands covered in clay, creating things that were imperfect and beautiful precisely because of their flaws. The instructor praised my progress, said I had good instincts. It felt strange to be praised for something that had nothing to do with being someone's wife or someone's mother. To be seen just as myself. I was reading books I wanted to read, not books someone else thought I should read. I was learning that I liked my coffee black, that I preferred mornings to evenings, that I was actually good at my job when I wasn't constantly second-guessing myself. I discovered I liked going to movies alone, that eating dinner at 9 because I got distracted working felt freeing rather than wrong, that I could make decisions about my own life without consulting anyone. Small things, tiny rebellions against the person I'd been trained to be. But they added up to someone I was starting to recognize and even like. I ran into my ex at a coffee shop one Saturday morning. I was there with a book, enjoying the rare luxury of time to myself while the kids were at his place. He was there with a date, some woman I didn't recognize, and they were laughing about something when he looked up and saw me. His face went through about 5 different expressions in rapid succession: surprise, guilt, defensiveness, something that might have been longing, and finally resignation. I gave him a small nod of acknowledgement and went back to my book. His date said something to him, and they left a few minutes later. I didn't feel jealous. I didn't feel much of anything, actually, except maybe a mild curiosity about whether he'd tell her the truth about why his first marriage ended. But it wasn't my problem anymore. None of it was my problem anymore. That night, putting the kids to bed after they came back from his place, my son asked me a question. "Mom, are you happy now?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. Not the automatic yes, of course, I might have given before, but an honest assessment. "Yeah," I said, surprised to realize it was true. "Yeah, I think I am. Not all the time and not in the way I expected to be, but yeah, I'm happy." "Good." He hugged me tight. "You're my #1 choice." I held him close, tears pricking my eyes, and realized this was what being loved actually felt like. Not being measured against someone else. Not being accepted as a consolation. Just being valued fully and completely for exactly who I was. Later that night, after both kids were asleep, I stood in my small apartment and looked around. The furniture was secondhand. The carpet was old. The walls needed painting. But it was mine. I'd chosen it, paid for it, made it into a home. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, standing at that Christmas party, hearing those words that shattered my world. I thought about the woman I'd been for 8 years before that, trying so hard to be enough, never understanding why I always fell short. And I thought about the woman I was becoming, someone who knew her own worth, who didn't need anyone else's validation, who could look in the mirror and like the person looking back. It had taken the worst betrayal of my life to get here. It had taken months of therapy and tears and late-night anxiety attacks. It had taken confronting some hard truths about the person I'd been and the person I wanted to become. But standing there in my small apartment, listening to my kids breathe in their room, feeling the quiet satisfaction of being alone without being lonely, I realized something important. I wasn't the second choice anymore. I was my own first choice, and that was enough.